Smallman and Harris Gilbert here at their law firm in beautiful, sunny Miami, Florida. And in the news today is one article and one debate and one bill after another with regard to this whole issue of arms control and whether we're going to register, whether we're going to have a national registration system, how we determine who gets guns and who doesn't get guns, and what the size of those guns need to be or should be or can't be, and how many bullets. So I'm going to set it up right now, and we'll let Andrew Smallman start out first with this. And Andrew, how are you coming down on this? What do you see with regard from the position of somebody who's a criminal lawyer? How do you come out on this?
I think that certain weapons are relatively unnecessary for the times that we're in. I 100% understand, and I am behind anyone who wants to own a weapon at home to defend their house against someone who is an intruder. I don't think you need an AK-47 to do that. I think a gun registry would be a decent idea. I think that the people who want to acquire guns illegally are going to acquire guns illegally. I think clearly our system needs some tweaking. But I think the Second Amendment is a good thing. I think it's in place for a good reason. I don't think that some of the people who demand to have these high-powered assault rifles and AK-47s, they like to fall back on the Second Amendment, but I really don't think that's what the people who drafted that amendment had in mind, and I think times have changed, along with everything else. So I think that their hearts are in the right place, but I think most people who want assault rifles and AK-47s, if you ask them, why can't we take these away from you? I think their response would be, well, the government says I can have them, and we've always been able to have these. You're not going to take them now. I don't have an answer for them, really.
So Harris, what do you think? You agree with your partner there, or you have another take?
Well, I mean, I think we really need to look at why now. Why now, all of a sudden, after hundreds of years of having the right to bear arms and having gun control on a certain basis, why now are we going to change everything? And I think people are going to look to the recent tragedies, the one in Newtown specifically, which is the most emotion-evoking one. And if we had better gun control laws, if we had a registry, would that have prevented what happened? And I think that you can't say yes. I think that certainly gun control makes sense, but if someone is in such a state of mind that they want to do harm to people on such a great level, certainly we don't want to make it easy for them to do it. But I feel like picking on the people who are the NRA and do enjoy guns and gunsmanships and protecting themselves and calling them the problem for a terrible act of a clearly mentally ill person is possibly the wrong way to go about it. Now, obviously, no one really needs an AK-47 in everyday life. And another question surrounding Newtown is, I think it was the mother who had the weapon in her home. This is someone who works around children. She had an AK-47 accessible in her home, and why does that person have that weapon? Well, the reason that she has it is because she's allowed to have it. And it certainly fell into the wrong hands at that time and was, possibly one of the direct causes of the massacre. So I definitely feel that we need to control the guns. We need to take certain guns away from people. But I also feel that there is an element to this that will always exist, and that's the human element. And no matter how much regulation we do, I think we've already gone too far. I think there's already too many firearms that are on the street. And I think that in order for us to truly rectify everything, we would have to turn to a society that would basically completely turn on the Second Amendment and possess all guns, go through a sweep of the nation And that's just something that's not really feasible.
I think it's you can look at other countries that have more stringent gun control laws and less violent crime and all of that across the board. The problem is our country's way too far past that at this point. And I think that's what Mr. Gilbert was just saying. To try to do a sweep of our country to try to collect certain types of guns or guns from certain types of people, I think we're way too far past that. And all you have to do is look back to see how our country was acquired. We brought guns over from Europe and we took out the people who were here first. Then, once the government from England tried to assert themselves against people who had, geographically separated themselves, although they were supposed to be part of that monarchy, they used guns to win a war that got us this country. And shortly thereafter comes, the Second Amendment and how that tyranny in England oppressed us and so we have to put these things in order. And
but that's
as time goes on,
that's the military, and certainly, the people in the military need to have whatever weapons they need to have to defend our country.
But those weren't military people; they were militia.
Correct.
Well, I guess that's all they had at that point. It was the common citizen.
And I'll find 1,000 people in Idaho and Wyoming that'll get right on board with all this. So, they have their weapons. Now I'm not just singling out those two states, but there's a lot of rural areas where people are harboring large amounts of weapons for this
doomsday.
This doomsday, or when the government comes for them, or imposes just one too many laws, or.
But who am I to tell someone that they can't have that gun to help them in their defense of their home, or their desire to do gamesmanship? I personally may not do those things, but I live in America, so I can make that choice. So at what point do I draw the line and start making choices for other people?
Well, what if I told you that they should have to have a mental health evaluation before allowing to register for a gun?
What if someone has mental health issues, but it's just anxiety or depression? Where do you draw the line? What are you basing?
I don't draw the line.
Where does someone draw the line?
It'd be tough.
How intrusive are you going to be in order to infringe on people's rights? And I think
does PMS count?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Definitely. Well, I guess the question is, what's a right and what's a privilege? And these are our fundamental rights in the Constitution.
Got to pass a driving test.
Right. Well, in the state of Florida, having a driver's license is a privilege. It's not a right. So they can take it from you. You have to pass a test to get it. But having a driver's license wasn't in our Bill of Rights, wasn't in our Constitution. Having firearms is the Second Amendment.
But even in the case of an automobile, I just bought myself a T60, a turbo 6-speed, 300 horsepower car. I don't need that to drive around on the streets any more than I need 15 bullets in a clip or a gun that fires automatically. But that 300 horsepower automobile certainly could potentially make me more dangerous on the street. But I just wanted to get it to have fun.
The first major mistake that you make, someone's going to have the ability to write you a citation that there's a little box where they can check and it can say this person needs to be retested.
We need mental testing before we give driver's license.
We need mental testing before we give driver's license.
I think that no matter what, I think you're going to have situations where people who are not of sound mind and judgment get a hold of weapons that no one, even people who love assault rifles and love AK-47s, would ever agree that those people should have their hands on them. And tragedies are going to occur based on that. And I really don't think that there's any system in place that is going to eliminate 100% of that. And to be quite honest with you, I think limiting access is a good start, but at the same time, you're limiting legal access. You're not really eliminating access altogether. So, what are we really doing here? Are we putting on a nice show so that everyone knows that we care about all these people who have died? We do care about all these people who have died. but I don't think passing legislation is going to avoid the next incident. I don't think it would have avoided the last incident. What do we say to the people who at Sandy Hook Elementary, those people who make the argument that said if someone were just present with a gun on duty there, would this kid who went shooting kids, would he have had 20 minutes or would he have had 30 seconds? And then the argument comes up: do you want to arm teachers? My wife's a teacher. I don't want her armed. She's capable and she exercises good judgment, but I don't know if in a situation where she was responsible for protecting 20 people, had her own kids, and hopefully me on her mind at the time, I don't know how good her judgment would be. I don't know how accurate her shot would be. Who are we really putting in charge here? Can we afford to have an officer at every school? To me, the answer is yes, because kids are worth everything. That's the future of our country. Adults too. But then the question is are we living under an army state where there's someone with a gun on every corner to make sure you're okay? Do you want that? I don't know. I don't, but...
You brought up your wife, and that reminds me of a story I just read yesterday in the paper about this 94-year-old man who killed his 96-year-old wife. They've been married for 70 years, and he said he just couldn't take it anymore, and he murdered her with a knife. So now we're going to have to start having mental checking to determine whether somebody should be allowed to carry a knife or not.
Well, at a certain age, you should be only allowed to butter bread, not cut sandwiches. Let's be honest.
Right,
So
but I guess where there's a will, there's a way. And,
Yeah.
But we can do a better job of regulating, who has access to these superpower weapons, and hopefully that will save certain lives.
By the way, the easy answer is not to regulate guns; it's to regulate ammo.
Potentially, but ammo you can build yourself pretty easily. It's not that hard to set up a little factory. I think that what seems to be on the national level kind of a consensus area seems to be the idea of being a little more effective at gun sales checking. In other words, background checks, mental health checks, or whatever. Maybe extending that to gun shows. How much good that will do.
Yeah, I don't see why someone who goes to a gun show and sells guns should really be any different than someone does from a store. Either way, you're part of the interstate sale of a firearm. Just because you're at a show and obviously there's more maybe of an immediacy to make money, I understand that, but it shouldn't compromise the regulations.
These events are all so tragic and they're so shocking that it shocks the system. But so many more people die of so many other ways, so much greater than this. It's just, we're not designed to turn on the news and see that. God, especially kids. The movie theater, that was a bad thing. But an elementary school takes it to another level. And it really. I drop my kids off at school every day, and I expect them to be safe there. And when an event like that takes place, it really shakes the foundation of what every parent thinks is true, and that's that when I drop my kids off, I'm going to be able to pick them up at the end of the day, and I'm going to get to go to work and try to provide for my family, and at the end of the day, I'm going to get to see them again. I think that jars people a whole bunch into action. But, if we put our resources towards other things, and I don't have all the answers clearly, but, I think if we put our resources towards maybe more mental health counseling, people would be in maybe a more stable state. But you can't ever account for the young adult whose mental health problems have just began its onset in a situation where they can't exercise judgment and they have access to a registered weapon, maybe from a parent, maybe from a friend, maybe from a family member, and then you can take it a step further. They go looking for a weapon, registered or otherwise. You're never going to get in front of that situation, whether you like it or not.
Well, I think one of my favorite sayings of Ronald Reagan was, "They never take out a stop sign." And what we find is that all of a sudden somebody gets hurt at a corner, and then there's a big to-do about putting a stop sign at that corner. Then that stop sign is there forever. And I think that happens across all of this. I think that's what we're talking about here. We had an unusual circumstance of children being killed at a school in this very unique way. Doesn't happen very often. It's statistically would be the dot on an I. And all of a sudden you put in all kinds of regulation with regard to this one incident, and then you pile regulation on top of regulation. Some people call it a slippery slope. But at some point we have to say, where do we want the government in our business, and where do we want the government not to be in our business?
Well, the last time the government clearly overstepped its bounds was prohibition. That didn't last long. You know, they took out they put in a stop sign, and people said, "Hell no." They took out the stop sign. They probably shouldn't have.
Maybe not. We now we seem to be taking out the stop sign about marijuana too, at least in Denver.
Right.
So, any more thoughts on the subject of gun control today?
Well, that's it for now. I guess we'll see what Barack Obama and his boys have for us.
Okay. Until next time.
Yep.
You got it.